Ever get that, like, little flicker of worry when you're heading out, even for just a quick walk in the woods? Or maybe you're someone who's got a hike all planned out. That voice in the back of your head just reminding you, even the simplest outdoor thing, it can, throw you a curveball sometimes. And that's exactly what we're diving into today, the unexpected stuff the outdoors can throw at you.
Yeah, and what we're looking at is it's really down to earth. We're talking about a student reference manual for a survival course, so it's not just some theoretical stuff. This is knowledge that comes from, like, understanding real emergencies.
Totally. What we want to do today is pretty straightforward. It's to give you, the listener, some key things, some insights that'll really help you be safer and just more aware when you're out there. We're going to be focusing on those common risks and, even more importantly, how to get ready so you can handle them, if they pop up.
Oh, and we know your time is valuable, so we've really kind of boiled it down to the core stuff, the things that can actually make a difference, maybe even save your life, and no big data dumps, just the vital stuff.
Okay, so let's get into it. The manual starts by talking about what it calls a primary killers in survival situations. And some of these, they might surprise you. We're talking drowning, heart attacks, exposure, and catastrophic falls.
And what's really interesting is these aren't always these crazy, dramatic things like you see in movies. I mean, like drowning, that's obvious, but a heart attack, that can actually be made a lot worse by the stress of an emergency and all that physical exertion. And the thing is, these aren't some, like, exotic dangers. They're often the result of people underestimating pretty common situations. Just shows you got to be on your toes, even on, like, a quick outing.
And check this out, the most common reason people end up in the hospital after being outdoors is a leg injury. Think about that. You twist an ankle or something worse happens to your leg, suddenly what was just a little annoying is now a major problem.
And the manual makes it clear, the people who get into trouble the most out there, they're not those extreme athletes, climbing Everest. They're day hikers, day users, regular folks, probably just like you, heading out for what they think is going to be a chill time.
Which leads us right into those catastrophic falls, the really bad ones. The manual points out that these usually happen after someone realizes they're lost. That's when panic can take over and they make bad choices, like scrambling down a steep slope they don't know, or like trying to hike in the dark without a decent light because they're worried about being out all night.
That really highlights the importance of staying calm, even when things go wrong. The fear of being stuck out there, it can override your common sense, and you might try something risky like that dangerous descent in the dark. It all goes back to not getting overwhelmed. Clear thinking, that's key, especially when you're in a tight spot.
And it can get even more serious. The manual connects those falls to exposure. You could get an injury that wouldn't be fatal on its own, but if you can't move and you're stuck out in the elements, even a minor thing can turn life-threatening. Suddenly, that sprained ankle, it's not just a sprain, it's a battle against hypothermia.
Exactly. And that brings us to this really important idea in the manual. They call it disaster synergy.
Disaster synergy. Usually synergy means things working well together. But disaster synergy, that doesn't sound so good.
It's not. What's fascinating is how the manual explains it. You see, it often starts with just one small mistake, something seemingly insignificant. But then the person, they're untrained, they're caught off guard, so they react in a hurry, they panic, and that just compounds the problem. It's like a domino effect. One bad thing leads to another.
Like a chain reaction of bad decisions fueled by panic, right? That ties in with that idea of not getting overwhelmed, having a clear plan, It shows how little slip-ups can turn into a major emergency real quick.
Exactly. And the manual goes on to lay out what it calls the 3 primary factors found in most wilderness survival emergencies. These are the root causes, the things that often set off that domino effect.
So what are these key factors we need to watch out for?
The first one is underestimating the task. And the manual, it doesn't mince words. Complacency kills. It's just a short hike thinking that leads to people leaving behind essential gear or, not having the right training for what seems like a simple outing.
I think we've all been there, right? Oh, it's just a quick thing. I don't need all that stuff. But the manual really emphasizes how easy it is to get caught up in the moment, how beautiful it is out there, and then without realizing it, you push yourself too far. Or, as they say, get in over your head.
And the examples they give are spot on, like going too far without the right clothes for cold or wet weather, not carrying enough water, tackling climbs that are beyond your skill level, even vacationers underestimating how dangerous mountain rivers can be. All these activities, they seem harmless enough, but they can turn risky in a heartbeat.
Which takes us straight to the second factor. Preparedness issues. The manual points out, because those day hikers are often the ones who get in trouble, they're usually just not ready for an unexpected night out or a medical situation in the field.
And it's not just about having gear, it's about having the right gear and knowing how to use it. The manual talks about this problem of inappropriate equipment, stuff that's low quality or not really designed for the emergencies you might face. Imagine having a survival kit that's full of fishing hooks but has no way to purify water.
That makes perfect sense. A cheap rain poncho won't do much in a downpour, and a couple of Band-Aids won't be enough for a serious cut. It shows you got to be smart about packing, not just tossing random things into your bag.
And the third factor is lack of training research. The manual is clear: if you're not adequately trained, you're much more likely to make those common mistakes we've been talking about.
It's like, if you don't know what to look out for, you'll probably miss those warning signs or make bad choices when things start to go south. The manual even says people without the right training, they might overlook things that are obvious to someone with even basic survival knowledge.
Exactly. And when you're in a stressful situation, that lack of training can lead to desperate actions, doing the wrong thing, and potentially making the situation worse. This really underscores why the stuff we're talking about in this deep dive is so important.
Okay, so we've seen why those outdoor emergencies happen.
Yeah.
Now, what can we do to avoid them? The manual really pushes for being proactive, and they even use that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely. And the manual breaks down that proactive approach into 3 parts: having a personal emergency protocol, doing your research before you go, and being properly prepared, with the right gear and knowledge.
So let's start with that emergency protocol. What does that look like for regular people like us?
It's actually pretty simple. Make sure someone who's not going with you, they know where you're going, when you'll be back, what you'll be doing, and most importantly, when they should call for help if they haven't heard from you.
Like having a safety net, just in case. And the manual also talks about trigger points. What are those exactly?
Trigger points, think of them like preset limits or conditions. Things like, this is my absolute turnaround time no matter what, or if the weather does this, I do that, or if my supplies drop below this level, I turn back. It's all about stopping yourself from getting into a dangerous situation in the first place.
So telling someone your plan and setting limits for yourself. Got it. What about the research part? That sounds pretty broad.
It is, but the core is knowing the environment you'll be in, inside and out. That means checking the weather forecast. And I mean really checking it. Understanding those potential hazards that are common in the area, and knowing how to dress right, what gear to bring, and having those emergency protocols we just talked about.
The manual really focuses on exposure, doesn't it? Like being caught out in the elements.
It does. And preventing that starts with dressing right for the weather you expect. But it's not just about staying warm enough. It's about having the things you need to handle an unexpected night out there.
And research isn't just about the general area, right? You got to think about what you're actually doing, too, like the activity itself.
Exactly. Research and even basic training for common emergencies that might happen during your specific activity and in that specific spot. Every environment has its own quirks, altitude problems in the mountains, dehydration in the desert, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. So have a protocol, do your research, and last but not least, preparation. What are the big things to keep in mind there?
Preparation boils down to having the right survival and medical kit. You got to build this kit carefully, thinking about the proven dangers of the environment, the task you're doing, and any personal medical needs you have.
So that basic first aid kit you get at the store, it's probably not going to cut it in a lot of situations, huh?
Right. It really needs to be specific to your needs and what you might face. And the manual also makes a point about your own physical condition. Staying fit, being properly hydrated and nourished, those things can be your biggest allies if something goes wrong.
Great point. You can have all the fancy gear, but if your body's not up to the challenge, it might not matter.
Okay, let's say despite all our best efforts, things do go south. What should we focus on immediately?
The manual has this clear survival order of operations. It's like a checklist of actions to take.
So what's the absolute first thing on that list?
Stabilize any life-threatening injuries or illnesses right away. That's got to be the priority. You can't do much else if someone's in critical condition.
Totally logical. What comes next?
Deal with the immediate threat of exposure. Like we said, that can become a big problem fast, no matter what the original issue is.
And the final step in that initial response.
Start figuring out how to get out of there. Extrication, that's the term they use. Getting yourself rescued or signaling for help effectively. So Stabilize, protect yourself from the elements,
Yeah.
and then get to safety.
Got it. Now, the manual talks about those first few moments when disaster strikes. What's the most important thing to do right off the bat?
Calm down, focus your mind. The manual emphasizes your mental state. That's your most powerful tool out there. So take a second, gather your thoughts, analyze what's going on, and don't let panic control you.
Easy to say, harder to do when you're in a scary situation, right?
Oh, for sure. Which is why the manual recommends these breathing techniques to get that panic under control. Take slow, deep breaths, even count them. It'll center you, lower your heart rate, fight that adrenaline rush.
So simple deep breaths can actually make a difference in those crucial first moments. What's next in that initial response?
It's all about situational awareness. Look at what you have, your gear, your supplies, and then what's around you in the environment. If you're lost, try to get to a higher spot if it's safe. Then figure out what you need most, make a priority list, and come up with a plan.
Sounds like a way to bring order to what could feel like total chaos. Exactly. And behind all of this, the manual talks about developing a survival mindset. It's that I can, I must, I will attitude, combined with constantly thinking critically. You got to keep reevaluating your situation, be ready to change your plan as things change, and improvise solutions with whatever you have. Every situation is different, so you got to adapt.
Makes total sense. Mental toughness, it's huge. Okay, now let's talk gear. The manual has a whole section on that. What are the biggest things to remember?
They start by saying something really simple. Always check your pack, your pockets, before every single outing, even if it's just a quick one. Sounds basic, but people forget, and it can have serious consequences.
And it's not just about having stuff, it's about having the right stuff, right?
Absolutely. Choose gear that's proven to be reliable in emergencies. Stick to the essentials, and make sure it can handle the elements, temperature, moisture, rough handling.
What about communication? That seems super important if you're in trouble.
It's crucial. Always have a way to communicate and signal for help. But don't just buy a device, you gotta know how to use it and what's best for your location and the situation before you need it. Think about cell reception, the terrain, weather, all that.
And we talked about medical kits earlier. The manual really stresses customizing those.
Yeah. Those pre-made kits, they often don't have what you might need out in the wilderness. A good kit should be tailored to you, your medical needs, your activity, and the climate.
Now, the manual lists some things they say you should always carry in remote areas. What are those absolute must-haves?
Okay, here's the list. First, an all-weather fire-making system. They specifically say stormproof matches and a solid fuel accelerant that burns hot and long enough to light damp tinder. They say at least 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes, minimum. And actually, they recommend against relying solely on fire steels for starting a fire in an emergency.
Good tip to keep in mind. What's next?
A way to purify water. They say chlorine or iodine tablets, plus a filter with 0.2 micron force. That'll deal with those nasty microbes.
Essential for survival. Anything else we should always have?
Some way to signal and communicate, like we said. Then emergency shelter. A waterproof, windproof, rugged emergency blanket is a good option. Compact and quick to deploy.
Shelter, check. What about tools?
A good cutting tool. They recommend Victorinox or Leatherman, durable and multifunctional. The further you're going and the more you might need to use it, the bigger and tougher the tool should be. They even say to go bigger if it might be wet.
Wet conditions, good point. What about light?
A weatherproof, rugged light source, preferably a headlamp so your hands are free. You can use it as a lantern or handheld light too.
Makes sense. Anything else we should always pack?
Some strong cordage, Kevlar, waxed nylon, parachute cord, those are all good. And lastly, a container for drinking water. They suggest a stainless steel bottle, the food grade, non-lined kind. It's durable, light, and you can boil water in it safely. They even mention a specific brand.
Okay, that's a great list of essentials. Now, the manual has this interesting story about a lost hiker. It shows how these principles can play out in a real situation. It's about a 16-year-old, William Parvin, who got lost in San Bernardino National Forest.
Yeah, his case really illustrates a lot of what we've been talking about. He went on this day hike up Mount San Gorgonio, pretty big mountain, with his dad and younger sister.
So how did he end up lost?
Well, he and his sister went ahead of their dad, and his sister started feeling sick from the altitude. So he told her to wait for their dad, and he kept going towards the summit, figuring he'd meet them on the way back. But he misjudged how much daylight was left, got caught by sunset, took a wrong turn, and got lost in the dark.
So already we can see a few things that might have contributed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going ahead alone, maybe not thinking about the time, and then ending up hiking in the dark without enough light.
Exactly. His dad and sister looked for him all night and then reported him missing in the morning. Big search and rescue operation. Meanwhile, William, he saw some city lights in the distance and tried to head towards them.
What happened during those 3 days he was out there?
He had run-ins with wildlife, cold nights, even started hallucinating. He fell a few times, bruised ribs, and lost his flashlight, which made things way harder. He even saw a rescue helicopter at one point, but he was down in a ravine. They couldn't see him.
It must have been terrifying for a 16-year-old. How do you eventually make it out?
He found this creek, Whitewater Creek, and decided to follow it downstream. He'd run out of water, so he drank from the creek, which he said made him a little sick, but his dad said it was better than being dehydrated. He followed the creek till it led to a fire road, and then he followed that until he found people and flagged down a truck driver.
And what kind of shape was he in when they found him?
They treated him for scrapes, bruises, those bruised ribs, a minor concussion from his falls, and dehydration. But they were expecting him to be in much worse shape after 3 days. He recovered pretty quick, and get this, his main worry when they rescued him was making sure they checked him for ticks.
Wow. Lost for 3 days, went through a lot, but came out okay. Really shows you the power of preparedness and resilience.
It does. And it leads us right into our next big topic, understanding exposure, cold, and heat. The manual says preventing exposure is key.
Why is that so important?
Because, they say, it's usually pretty easy to maintain a safe body temperature when you're out there. But once you've got a severe exposure emergency, fixing it can be really hard, sometimes almost impossible. Their phrase is, maintenance is critical. Recognize those early signs, take action before it becomes a crisis.
Let's start with cold exposure, hypothermia. What's crucial to know about preventing and recognizing that?
Number 1, dress right for the weather. They recommend the 3-layer system for cold, base layer to manage moisture, middle layer for insulation, and an outer layer that's waterproof and breathable.
Can you explain why each layer is so important?
Sure. The base layer, the one against your skin, should dry fast and insulate even when damp. It wicks sweat away. The middle layer traps air, keeps you warm. Choose a material that still insulates even when wet. And the outer layer, it blocks rain, snow, wind, but it also breathes so that sweat can escape and you don't get condensation inside your clothes.
So stay dry from outside and inside. What about those early warning signs of hypothermia? What should we look for?
They have this catchy phrase, stumbles, fumbles, and mumbles. It means uncontrollable shivering, numb fingers and toes, being clumsy, and mental confusion, slurred speech. Also, dehydration makes hypothermia worse, so stay hydrated.
What should you do if you think someone's getting hypothermic?
Get them out of the cold right away. If their clothes are wet, change them into dry stuff. Then warm them up gradually. For bad cases, handle them gently and keep them lying down at first. Important. Don't try to rewarm frostbitten areas if they might freeze again. And big warning, never let someone with hypothermia fall asleep.
Serious stuff. What about things you can do to prevent it beforehand?
Hand and body warmers are good to have, those emergency blankets too. Keep all your essential gear, extra clothes, shelter, in waterproof bags.
Now let's talk about the other extreme, heat exposure or heat stress. How's that different?
In hot, dry places, they actually recommend covering up from head to toe, but with light, breathable, light-colored clothes. You're not trying to stay warm, you're trying to block the sun, prevent that UV and infrared radiation from turning into heat. That's why they suggest wide-brimmed hats, loose white long-sleeve shirts, light pants.
So cover up to stay cool. That's interesting. What are the signs of heat stress?
It varies a lot between people, and it can come on fast. Headache, nausea, fast heartbeat, confusion, feeling disoriented. Those are common. And if someone stops sweating even though it's hot and they're active, that's a bad sign. Also, really dry, painful throat can be an early indicator.
What should you do if you suspect heat stress?
Get them into shade right now. Sit them down, take off extra layers, give them small sips of water. And here's important advice. Know your limits. Know when to stop pushing yourself in the heat. Don't overdo it.
How do you prevent heat stress in the first place?
Being in good shape and staying hydrated are key. They actually recommend pre-hydrating for 3 days before doing anything strenuous in the heat. Drink water before you feel thirsty, and replace those electrolytes, especially during long activities.
What should we pack for hot environments?
Cold packs, electrolyte supplements, something to make shade if there's none around. The manual even lists specific electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, bicarbonate.
Okay, we've covered unseen threats, how to handle cold and heat. Let's talk about the classic survival needs. Fire, water, shelter. Starting with fire, what are the basics?
They talk about the fire triangle: heat, fuel, and oxygen. You need all three. And they explain that convection, that's heat transfer through moving fluids like air, that's the most powerful way to get a fire going. So when you build a campfire, making that teepee shape with dry tinder and kindling, that's not just for looks. It creates that upward flow of hot air, draws in more oxygen, feeds the flames. So yeah, building that efficient heat column with dry tinder, that's the trick.
And for emergency fire starting, what methods do they suggest?
Always carry a reliable all-weather fire starter. They really emphasize stormproof matches and a good, solid fuel accelerant, one that can burn hot enough to light even damp stuff. They say at least 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. And they actually say, don't rely just on fire seals for emergencies. They can be unreliable, especially if you're not practiced.
Good to know. What about fire and shelter, especially when it's cold?
In cold conditions, they say, a shelter's good for wind and rain, but it won't keep you warm without a heat source like a fire. They even mention building reflector walls out of natural stuff to direct the heat into your shelter, making it warmer inside.
They also mention those primitive methods, like the bow drill. Is that something we should really try to learn?
They present those friction methods as a last resort if everything else fails. They go into detail about the wood you need, the dimensions, all that. But for most people, the takeaway is it's a tough skill to master, not something you can count on in a stressful situation. Better to have those reliable fire starters, the matches, and accelerant.
Okay, fire starters, check. Now water. How do you find it out there, and how do you make sure it's safe to drink?
Look for the riparian zone. That's where the vegetation's thicker and greener, usually along rivers, streams, lakes. Water follows patterns, lines in streams and rivers, circles in ponds and puddles. The plants often show you those patterns. In dry areas, look for bugs and animal tracks too that can point to water.
Found some water. How do you know if it's okay to drink? How do you purify it?
The main worry is those little microbes. They can make you sick. The best way to purify water is boiling. Rolling boil for 1 minute at another minute for every 1,000 meters you're above sea level. They even say you can boil water in a heavy-duty plastic bag by dropping hot rocks in it, but a stainless steel bottle is better.
What can happen if you drink bad water?
Nausea, diarrhea, cramps, fever, that's the usual stuff. It's rarely fatal if you're healthy and get treatment eventually, but it'll weaken you, make it hard to function. They mention Giardia and Cryptosporidium specifically. Those are nasty ones, and the symptoms can take a while to show up.
That delayed reaction makes it a tough call, doesn't it? Drink now and risk getting sick later, or...
Yeah, it's a balancing act. Do you need the water right now, like in a heat emergency, or can you wait and purify it? In a dire situation, you might have to take the risk.
What about water from ponds and puddles? Is that any different?
Yeah, standing water can have more stuff in it besides microbes, amoeba, algae, all sorts of things. You might need to filter out those chemicals and particles, not just kill the germs. For a natural filter, they suggest using charcoal from your fire. And to get rid of larger stuff, make a pre-filter with a cloth, a sock top, or plant fibers.
Fire, water, check. Now shelter. What's important for choosing a spot and building it?
Location is key, they say. Ideally near water and firewood, but away from hazards. Falling trees, unstable slopes, animal dens, flood zones. In a forest during high winds, an open area might actually be safer.
What about the shelter itself? They recommend a specific design, right?
They like the A-frame Metropod design. Simple to build, good protection, pretty stable. Traps heat well, especially if you can close off the ends. If you won't have a fire inside, make it as small as you can comfortably fit. That helps hold the heat.
How do you build an A-frame properly?
The walls need to slope more than 45 degrees so rain and snow slide off. The main support is an A-frame or tripod at each end with a ridge pole connecting them. The point where the poles meet should be about hip high. You can adjust it depending on how many people, but more than 3 gets a less efficient for heat. For waterproofing, use the thatching technique. Overlap the material by at least a third, like shingles, starting from the bottom, until you can't see light from inside. You can put logs on the outside to hold the thatching down against wind.
What about what you sleep on? Lying on bare ground can't be good.
It's not. You need insulation, a brush bed, they call it. Gather that stuff before building the shelter, make sure it fits inside. Remember, it's for warmth, not just comfort. And they say things like ferns and grasses aren't good, they flatten easily, and you need a ton of it.
Okay, so we've got fire, water, shelter. What if you need to signal for help? How do you make sure rescuers see you?
They group signals into audio, visual, and electronic, and then ground to air and ground to ground. For improvised signals, the key is shine, symmetry, bright colors, contrast, and movement. Make it obvious that something's there that shouldn't be.
So anything that screams human, what about visual signals for aircraft?
Make a big triangle or SOS on the ground, using something that contrasts with the surroundings. Keep it symmetrical and make it huge. The lines should be at least as long as a person so they can see it from the air.
Any tips for where to put it?
They say the best angle for aircraft to see it is about 45 degrees to either side of the cockpit. If they see you, they'll usually do a flyover and rock their wings, or if it's a helicopter, they might fly low and slow or hover and sound their siren.
What should you do once they've spotted you?
Don't assume rescue is coming right away. Keep working on those survival needs, fire, shelter, and never, ever approach a landing helicopter until they tell you to. It's dangerous, those rotors, the dust, the exhaust.
Good safety tip. And finally, the manual talks about basic first aid in the wilderness. What are the main points?
They really recommend taking a wilderness first aid WFA course, but they also list basic things for a WFA kit, and they emphasize tailoring it to your needs, the climate, group size, and activity.
What kind of stuff do they recommend for a basic kit?
Gauze, bandages, tape, a tourniquet, antiseptic wipes or iodine solution, elastic bandage, electrolytes, ORS, antihistamine, tweezers, small scissors, hemostatic gauze for serious bleeding. But again, they say, this is just a starting point, adapt it to your situation.
Wow, that's a lot of information. Just to recap, we talked about those common dangers, how little things can snowball into big problems, the importance of having a plan, doing research, and packing the right gear. We discussed what to do when things go wrong, those essential items you should always have, looked at a real-life example of a lost hiker. We covered preventing and treating cold and heat exposure, meeting those basic survival needs of fire, water, and shelter, how to signal for help, and some first aid basics.
And just by understanding those things, you can be so much safer and enjoy the outdoors with more confidence. You've got valuable knowledge now that can make a real difference.
So here's something to think about. Remember William Parvin and all those common pitfalls. What's one thing you could improve about your own preparedness before your next adventure? And how might that idea of disaster synergy affect how you make decisions in tough situations, not just in the wilderness, but in everyday life?
This deep dive was just a starting point. Keep learning about these things based on what you're interested in and the activities you do. There's always more to know, and being informed and prepared is the best way to make sure your time outdoors is safe, fun, and memorable for all the right reasons.